Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to The Nerdy Niche, the podcast about all the nerdy stuff that you love. On today's episode, we're going to be talking about the comic book series and the television series on Amazon Prime, The Boys. The Boys was a comic book series that was created in 2006 and lasted through 2012 and had over 72 issues. It was also picked up as a TV series in 2019 by Amazon Prime, and it's currently in its second season, with the third one coming out within a few months, I believe. So joining us today is my lovely co-host, Mr. Edison Myers. How you doing, Dan?
Fantastic as always. How about you, Jeremy?
Yeah, I'm surviving another day.
Yeah, good.
What's the nerdiest thing you did this week, sir?
The nerdiest thing I did this week, I'm still on video games right now. So I finished Tiny Tina's Wonderlands, at least the main story, even though that game's more about the end game, so I'm getting with that. And then, as always, D&D for me. I was doing a bunch of prep today for the game that me and you were doing. Not Into the Elements, but a game that me and my friends are doing, just a home game, and so I'm finishing up for our little tournament arc that we're doing.
Nice, yeah, I'm definitely looking forward to playing that tomorrow.
Yeah.
Also joining us is our good friend, Mr. Adam. You might know his voice from Into the Elements. How you doing today, sir?
Not too bad. Can't complain.
What's the nerdiest thing you did this week, sir?
Nerdiest thing? Probably watched the entire breakdown of The Boys.
Yeah. I did a little bit of reviewing myself. I read the comics, back when they first started coming out for a little while. Didn't get all the way through them, but I know enough we can talk about it today. I think the nerdiest thing that I did this week was so I don't know if any of you guys remember the Mighty Ducks, the cartoon Mighty Ducks.
Oh, yeah.
It was like one season. It was like this really, sort of crappy kids show when we were kids. The other night I found that on Disney Plus, and I just like ran through the whole thing. I watched the whole thing. It was
Was it nice and bad?
Oh, it was so bad. It's so
That's
bad.
Old school.
It's old school, just corny goodness. Like there's so many duck jokes in every single episode. I love old school cartoons, so I binged watched that entire season.
I need to go and find that now.
It's definitely bad, but in a good way. I really enjoy the old school cartoon thing.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, with that, one thing I was going to tell you about in that Tiny Tina's Wonderlands, like there's a lot of like random like media like references and stuff, and at one point like there's this little side quest that you're doing and you have to fight these like sand sharks that are going through, and the person that's talking is like, I hope you're ready to fight my totally jawsome like guardians, and when you fight them, there's like the regular ones, but then there were ones that were skinned like the street sharks, and they were named the different street sharks.
Yeah, that's awesome. Street sharks. That's great.
Yep.
Yeah, that's another real cool reference that I get to on occasion. Sometimes they'll try.
You remember the old puppets that you had?
Yeah.
Yeah, that was great.
Yeah, there was the little, and there was like the toys were actually really cool. Like toys were way cooler back in the day than they are now. Maybe it's because I was a kid too, but like they were like really tall and like made of rubber.
Yeah, they were heavy duty toys.
Yeah, they were good toys. Like,
you could mess somebody up with a street shark if you wanted to.
They had like all sorts of sharp edges. You could just like.
And then there was Stretch Armstrong back then too.
Yeah.
And his dog.
Mm-hmm. All right. Well, we're not here to talk about Stretch Armstrong today.
Yep.
Well, I mean, maybe kind of. I imagine he could maybe exist in this universe.
Yeah, that's fair.
In a really brutal version of this universe.
And one thing I do want to bring up today with this episode is The Boys is a very brutal, very adult-oriented.
Yes.
Comic book and show. So this one is very much going to be heavy on language, violence, gore, that kind of stuff. So just anybody, if you're listening with kids and stuff, just be prepared for that with this one. Maybe have your kids go out of the room just in case.
This is a Nerdy Niche After Dark episode.
Yeah, very much so.
Yeah.
Also, we're going to be talking about all kinds of things with the show and with the comic books, which could eventually end up in the show as well. So very big spoiler warning on this entire episode.
Yeah. I mean, the comic books I think were mostly pretty safe, but at the same time, yeah, you're right. They could come into the TV show, which is still being produced. So
yeah.
All right. So I guess we'll go ahead and crack into it. So how is it that you first learned about The Boys, Adam?
I had first heard about it by the Amazon Prime series.
Mm-hmm.
I had seen the trailer for the first season, and I'm like, oh my God, this looks amazing. And then I got sucked into it at that point, and I knew that it was based off of comics, but I didn't really delve too far into it until just recently.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I had first heard about The Boys, I think it's probably like 2007, 2008. It was a comic that's being produced by Wildstorm, which was like a sub-label of DC Comics at the time.
Right.
And, I was a big comic book nerd. I would go to the comic book store pretty much every week back then. And the owner of the shop had pointed it out to me. And then I picked up the first couple issues, and it was back when comics were $3 a piece and not like $5, which they are now.
Or more so.
Yeah, that's comic books. They aren't cheap, man. They're not cheap anymore.
Right.
Now I couldn't just like pick up a random series and wonder if I like it. Like I kind of have to know in advance.
For sure.
Yeah.
But back then it was easy to pick up an issue, and I really did enjoy it. So
yeah, my first experience with hearing. So I first heard about it like years ago. I never like looked into it really, but I remember at one point our friend Spencer, that I think he did the Star Trek episode.
Yeah, Spencer Hatch. Yep.
He was talking about the most like brutal comic series he had ever picked up, and he was telling somebody about it. And I kind of forgot about the name of it and everything. And then I was hanging out with our friend Mark Carfaro, who was also on our Avatar Last Airbender.
Yeah, he's been in a few episodes. We kind of just drag our friends into doing this.
Yeah, that's kind of what we do. But I was hanging out at his house, and he's like, hey, have you watched The Boys yet? And I was like, no, I haven't. And he's like, okay, I'll put it on for you. I hadn't seen anything for it. I had no idea what the show was. 100% just fresh eyes into it. And I was so surprised. I remember just like my jaw dropped in that first scene. There's a scene very beginning of the show, the main character just pulled up all the character. What was
Huey?
He's talking to his girlfriend. It's like a really sweet relationship.
Talking to Robin,
dealing with like a hard job and everything, and she's standing just off the curb in the street, and he's holding her hands, and then everything slows down, and then blood starts appearing into the screen, and there's a jawbone and everything. And then it speeds back up, and he's covered in blood, and he's holding hands.
He's still holding her like severed hands.
And a speedster superhero, they had been talking about superheroes and that kind of stuff in the world, stops, and he's covered in blood, and he looks back, and he goes, I'm sorry, I gotta go, and runs off. And that's how the show starts. And I was like, what the fuck?
Yep. So anybody who's relatively unfamiliar with the story of The Boys, so it takes place in a world where there are superheroes, and these superheroes are maybe not as careful or as heroic as what we come to expect from a standard comic book series. It's the writer Garth Ennis took a very cynical look at the superhero genre and really made it just made all the superheroes terrible people is basically what he did.
Yeah. They've been bought out by corporate America, which is amazing about it.
Yeah, exactly. The more corporations get involved, the worse it is. But also these guys are just, without revealing too much, don't get to talk about it. These people don't have a whole lot of humanity in them, and so they're superpowered with no morals, and that doesn't usually turn out very well.
Yeah,
very good way to put it.
You just brought up with that that I kind of wanted to ask you guys with the way the world is set up with superheroes and everything. What do you think of the concept of all of them having like their sponsorships and everything and having to kind of like live up to that and show that to the world when they're very different from like what they're advertising and just like the product placements and stuff with superheroes, and how you think that would be in the world if we did have superheroes?
I mean, I think that's probably the most realistic part, right? Like, of all of this, that part, if we had superheroes, they would definitely be like controlled by corporations.
Yeah. It's kind of like that, like with like NASCAR and that kind of stuff, how they have like the sponsorship logos all over their cars and everything, and like superheroes have all that all over their like outfits and stuff.
Well, you got like the Maeve Pride bars and the A-Train cereal and the A-Train energy drinks and all that kind of stuff. Like, it's very much a play on corporate America for sure.
Mm-hmm.
If you read some of Garth Ennis's other works, The Preacher is one of his. He's also done a couple of runs on a couple of, like, the more mainstream superheroes where he has a lot of sort of anti-capitalist messaging. And this is definitely like the sort of pinnacle of that communication for him.
Mm-hmm.
I think it kind of plays on both sides of it though too, where it's not like targeting one thing, it's just kind of a broad umbrella that he's just targeting everybody. But the fact that he has or that he added in these sponsorships and those sorts of things, or like the Maeve Pride bars from the TV show, for instance, like that's actually kind of a play on the comics as well. Whereas like this company Vought, they take in these people and they try to find a way to sell them, and then they dig into like who they are to try to be able to draw out something that they can put their name on and brand them with. And it's pretty cool.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's something that I mean we can all relate to, because that's something that happens all the time in real life.
Yeah,
right.
It actually happens a lot more with like politicians than we would like to think as well. But I mean, certainly celebrities, any celebrity is going to be, only showing maybe even half of who they really are, because the other half is marketing.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Well, and it kind of goes back to like the Maeve Pride bars there to kind of like touch a little more on that. It would be like, she illustrates multiple times that she's not actually a lesbian. She's bisexual. Right. So, but they straight up tell her, well, that's not going to quite work with our image, so we're going to make you portrayed as a lesbian. So you got to go with that. Right.
It's harder to sell. It's harder to sell bisexual than it is to sell lesbian.
Right. Exactly.
So let's go ahead and break into maybe the early part of the story as he referenced just there.
So one thing with the boys, what it's kind of following is a group of people kind of get together that have had different experiences and issues with these people that are supposed to be superheroes and protecting everyone, and not just like little like issues, but like serious, like people were killed, disappeared.
My girlfriend got run over by a speedster.
My wife got raped by a superhero, different things like that. And just kind of, it all got brought together mainly from, so you're following Huey, the one that his girlfriend got murdered in his hands.
Fiance.
And there is a character named Billy. He goes
Butcher.
Yeah. Billy Butcher.
Yep.
And he is kind of like he's like an Australian accent, bigger, broody guy, played perfectly by Carl Urban.
He's great in that show. He does look kind of significantly different from what Butcher does in the comic books.
Yeah.
A lot of it, when they were doing casting, they definitely weren't looking at like the appearance of the character in terms of the comics.
Yeah.
The only thing they did do is just a little side tangent here. So Huey in the comic books was actually designed to look like Simon Pegg.
Yep.
Oh yeah.
And then they brought him in as his dad too.
Yeah, and they
really
completely made up the role of the dad
Yeah.
from the comic books to the movie to the show.
Okay.
There's no dad in the comics at all.
There is actually a dad in the comics. He's just living in Scotland and is not involved in
that's right.
most of it.
Yeah. But so they Simon Pegg was too old to play Huey by the time the show came out. It was 2019.
Yeah.
So they basically just made the dad a lot more present and threw him in the show as kind of that little bit of a nod to it.
Yeah, that's really awesome. Yeah, I kind of noticed that before, like in the comics, but I never like really put it together.
Yep.
So that's really interesting.
Actually, Garth Ennis said that he actually modeled Huey after Simon Pegg.
Yeah, it was supposed to look like that. There was actually people who were worried, like the publishers were actually worried that he was going to get sued because it looked so much like Simon Pegg.
Right.
Yep. Seems like a pretty cool person.
Yeah, I don't think he's the type of person to really sue for that kind of thing.
Yeah.
I mean, I could be wrong. I don't really know too much about the guy personally, but he seems very nice.
Right. Yep.
But so in those early episode where you're first getting to know Huey and his situation, and then his girlfriend gets ran through. How was initially seeing that and reading that for you?
Initially, when the first time I saw it, like before I knew anything about it,
Right.
I pretty much had the same reaction that Edison was just talking about having. Like my jaw just dropped. I'm like, okay, this is where this show is going.
Yeah. Real dark, real fast.
Yeah, it really does go quick. And what's cool too, but it's like there's parallels to the comic book, but it's not exactly following the same storyline.
Well, no, it's not. If you wanted to try to put the comic book completely into the TV show, it would be pretty much unwatchable by most audiences.
Yeah, and that's there's actually a lot of scenes in the TV show that they had to take out of it, or even like from the script they had to take out because Amazon's like, no, we're not putting this on here.
Yeah. And a lot of situations that did happen were presented in the TV show, but in a much more toned down way.
Yeah, I believe is it Starlight?
Mm-hmm.
Starlight,
Mm-hmm.
Being brought into basically the Justice League because it's
the Seven. Yeah.
The Seven.
Mm-hmm.
She in the show basically has to perform oral sex on one of the members, the Deep, to get in, and I believe
on one of the members.
Yes.
I see what you did there.
And I believe, if I'm right, in the comics, it wasn't just him; it was the entire group.
All
actually, it was
all
Homelander, Black Noir, and A-Train. The Deep was not involved. In fact, the Deep plays a very minimal role in the whole thing.
He's very much a bad character in the comic books.
Yeah,
right.
And he looks much different in the comics than he does because he has like the old like school diver's helmet on.
Yeah, way more classic Aquaman looking.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
So when we're introduced to Butcher and the whole concept of the boys in the TV show, what were some of the main differences from the comic books?
Well, for one, Butcher had already, in the comic books, Butcher had already reassembled the boys with Frenchie and Mother's Milk. And whereas in the TV show, it was like he was bringing Huey in because he knew that he had this traumatic event with his fiance. And he was like, this is the guy we need to bring in, which is actually pretty similar to the comics as well. But it was after he had got these guys back together. And then I don't think Translucent was in the group at all, or in the Seven at all when in the books. So that was another big thing where it was kind of like he still didn't really know if he could trust Huey in the TV show. And then that whole thing happens with Translucent, where he gets attacked in his radio shack, basically, and then Butcher drives the car through the whole thing, and then they take him captive. Like, it was like, you're either in or get the fuck out of my way, kind of thing.
Yeah. And one thing I want to bring up with that too, part of why he ended up getting brought in is his girlfriend was killed by the superhero, and he was trying to I believe he was trying to do a lawsuit and different things, and it was just getting swept under the rug.
Mm-hmm.
And
they were trying to give him a whole bunch.
They were trying to get him to sign on.
Yeah. So basically, the Translucent character in the comics kind of ends up being Jack from Jupiter. I think he's kind of the closest analog to what Translucent was in the TV show.
Well, but the thing is too, in season 2, there's a part where Lamplighter and Huey are sitting watching porn of all these superheroes that were like playoffs of superheroes.
Yeah.
And one of those is actually a playoff of Jack from Jupiter.
Yeah.
So it was hard for me to really accept that part, because you know what I mean?
Yeah. But I think Translucent was kind of their replacement for him in terms of his place in the 7.
I could totally see that though. Yeah.
Yeah. I think that's kind of
I never looked at it that way, but that's
Yeah.
Mind blowing.
One thing I thought was really interesting is in the comic books, the boys are already backed by the CIA.
Yep.
They are a government agency, well, basically like a black ops government agency the entire time. Where in the TV show, they're portrayed more as like a sort of rogue unit, that doesn't have any sort of backing like that.
It was like Butcher was the only one that had any kind of CIA ties in the TV show.
Yeah, and in the show, it's more like he's like a rogue agent from them.
Yeah, exactly.
And then the rest of the boys aren't connected to them at all.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. They also just from the very beginning have the female with them. They don't go that story of finding her or anything like that either. So
that's just what they call her, huh?
Yeah, that's just what they call her.
They never actually gave her a name in the comics.
No, she's just the female.
Yep.
Is the Frenchie and her relationship kind of similar in the comics? I didn't read the comics,
sort of.
So.
Yeah, so they do still have somewhat of a romantic relationship.
Yeah. One thing I wanted to bring up from the early parts of the show that I really thought was interesting. So Frenchie, when they bring him in as the torturer, and the interrogator to be able to get all the information and to be able to kill this superhero. You just said his name. Translucent.
Yeah.
And he ends up being one of the most human and kind characters, which I found was really interesting that they did that. They went from such a brutal skill set to being such a genuine and good human being. He's actually probably my favorite character of the group.
He really took fondly to the female or Nico from the show.
Yeah.
He really attached to her, and he really did kind of bring out that hey, I'm a soft person kind of thing, trying to get that kind of connection with her, I guess.
Just like most of the things we'll talk about, the comic book does not try to make you relate to him on that level.
Right.
I think for TV shows in general that are from source material to make a more mainstream audience find appeal in it, they have to connect or sympathize with certain characters. And comic books just they don't assume that you really need that.
Yeah, which is kind of nice. Yeah.
Yeah, I think they just Frenchie is pretty much represented as just fucking brutal, in the comic books.
Oh, is he? Yeah.
Well, kind of towards the end of the whole series, though, you do kind of see more of that lighter to him all the way up until the very end. But yeah, for the good majority of the first 2/3 to maybe 3/4 of it, he is very much just fuck you, I'm going to get my job done kind of thing. You know?
Mother's Milk is portrayed a lot more similarly to the TV show and the comics as well. He's probably one of the most consistent characters in terms of the boys.
Okay.
Right.
Even more than Butcher?
Yeah, I mean, I would say so. I think there's a lot of
At least up until what we've seen so far, too.
Right. Well, so there's a lot of things that are coming up in the show that have been hinted at that happened basically in the past when the comic book started.
Okay.
Right.
A lot of stuff with the CIA backing is coming out now in season 2 and all of that. So I guess what we should talk about from here is the representation of Huey in the comic books versus the show. How did you feel like they did with casting and the way that they portray him in the show?
Casting, I loved it. Jack Quaid played him perfect. Personally, he doesn't like physically resemble him, but his demeanor and his internal conflicts, the way he played it out, was spot on. If you ask me, and the progression of his character all the way through season 2, you can see from the beginning where he's questioning it and he's like, yes, I'm into it. And then they blow up translucent. He's like, holy shit, what did I just do? And then he's questioning it again. And then he's back into it. And then he questions it again. Like the way his character portrays that is beautiful. In the comics, I do feel like there's more mechanics that had Jack Quaid's version of Huey been able to experience that, it probably could have gone very much in the same aspect, which is what's awesome about it. Because like you said, source material coming out of it, like it's living a different story of it, but it still has a lot of the same characteristics of it. Personally, that's how I thought about it.
So one of the things in the show that they're exploring is Compound V. Essentially the injection that gives you superpowers. In the comic books, the boys have actually taken Compound V, where it permanently gives them superpowers. Where in the TV show, it's portrayed more as like a temporary drug boost kind of thing. Which there is a version of that in the comics as well, but it's laced with cocaine.
Yeah, it's like cocaine and Compound V.
This one's a more temporary version, but the boys are actually injected from the CIA with Compound V because the way they put it in the comics is if you're going to be out getting punched in the face by superheroes, you can't die on the first attempt.
Oh, yeah.
Wait,
so what powers do they have in the comics? Because they don't have powers in the show.
It's basically super strength from what
it's like super strength and durability, essentially.
Oh, okay. For all of them?
Yeah.
Okay. Including Huey?
Yeah.
Okay.
So wait, hold on. Did Huey get injected didn't he get injected by Butcher in the comics?
He did, yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, so he's way more durable in the comic books. So he's very much represented as like a wimpy, like if he ended up actually getting in a fight, he would die. Where in the comic books, he has also taken Compound V like very early on, maybe like at issue 3.
Oh, okay.
So that makes him a lot more durable.
I do love that in the comics that it doesn't really like after taking getting the Compound V, it doesn't like buff him up or anything. It still keeps him the same way, but he's like he literally punches through another superhero's chest in the comics.
Yeah. So he just has essentially enhanced strength and durability.
Okay.
But I can see why they didn't do that on the TV show because it does eliminate a certain amount of risk.
Yeah.
And I think that for the TV show, they wanted those stakes high.
Yeah, and I think I feel like they wanted to. Sorry.
Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt there.
No, you're good. I was just going to say, I think it would also kind of take away the humanity of the boys.
Exactly.
Which is kind of what the story that they're trying to tell is.
Right.
That's kind of what I was actually going to get out on that too. So we were on the same track there.
So let's talk about the 7. So in the comic book series and the TV show, the 7 are a group of 7 heroes that are basically the Justice League. So we'll kind of go through them one-on-one, just get short little impressions of how you feel about each of the characters. So we'll go based on the TV show, and then we'll talk about some of the differences to the movies, or to the TV show and to the comic books.
Yep.
So starting with the TV show, how did you guys feel about the essentially Superman analog Homelander?
He's terrifying. Like, absolutely just one of the most awful people. I would say the most awful, but in season 2, they introduce a character that's even worse than Homelander, which I didn't know they could do. He is just awful. And it's just somebody that strong and powerful being that fucked in the head is really just, it makes you uncomfortable. And the actor does a phenomenal job.
Anthony Starr is beautiful.
And his vanity and everything plays in, especially that really awkward scene in, I think, season 2 with
season
the
2.
Great Changer.
Yeah.
He's like, I can do what I want.
So knowing the portrayal of him in the comics, Adam, how do you feel about the way that he translated to the TV show?
I can say I love the way Anthony Starr played him because it kind of showed. I'll get back to the comic book side of it, but it showed like that he's just a person that wants to be loved because in his entire life he's grown up basically he was a petri dish baby, never had a motherly love, never had a fatherly love. It was always kind of had a fatherly love, but it was all about just like learn. And he never really got to have somebody who cared about him for him. And then like you can see that progression all the way through season 2. And like you can see it in his face. Like when Stormfront is like, oh, I have to go to this meeting out at the tower. And he's like, oh, I really have a surprise for you. And then he walks into his trailer and he has this bouquet of roses for her that he had. And he like, you could see it in his face. Like he played it so well.
Yeah.
But going back to the comics, I think particularly that character really played Homelander a whole lot better than in the comics, because in the comics it's very much like, not very much, but he's kind of a two-dimensional character.
I agree. Yeah. He's a little understated in the comics.
So you think he's better in the TV show?
Agreed. Yeah.
He portrayed him beautifully.
I think the actor and everything that they did took the concept of that character and really like shaped it out a little bit better.
Yeah. They also make you so uncomfortable with like his relationship with the woman.
Don't get me wrong, he's a fucked up person.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
What's the woman from Vought that he's like in love with?
Victoria Stillwell.
Yeah. Still.
Oh my god, the stuff with the milk and stuff with her.
So they again, I think they added a little bit of humanity to Homelander in a way, which obviously contrasted his brutality even more. But it's in the comics, you don't really feel as bad for him because they do actually focus on him quite a bit less.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Did you guys know, fun fact, the entire time they're filming that show, the actor who plays Homelander is actually fairly short. So he actually wears high heels in all of the close-up shots.
Oh yeah.
Really? I've never seen him like stand up. Every time I see him, he's sitting on a chair talking. Huh.
So that's part of it. And anytime he's close up, like he's really close up on screen with someone else in that show, he's wearing high heels to make himself taller.
Huh.
I thought that was pretty interesting.
That's mind-blowing.
Yeah. So let's go ahead and move on real quickly. So we already kind of touched on the Deep in terms of the comic books not really being too prevalent. How did you feel about his presence in the TV show, though, Adam?
The Deep?
Mm-hmm.
I really like the character progression that they gave him. And they brought in the Church of, I forget the name, the church itself. Yeah, but I like that they brought that in as well and kind of gave him like a redemption arc. Whereas in the comics, they like you see and maybe 4 scenes, and that's about it.
Like in the TV show, the part I believe it's definitely in season 2 where he's been relegated to like the team in like Milwaukee or whatever it is. I can't remember where he ends up. Place. And then he meets this girl because at the beginning of the TV show, he's the one that forces Starlight to service him and sort of sexually assaults her. And so he ends up in this small podunk town where he's supposed to be the main superhero now because Vought basically shipped him off to get him away from the Seven.
Yeah, because she actually outs him
in
a very public place about it.
Yeah, so Starlight comes out public about the assault.
Right.
And so he gets out of this podunk town and he ends up hooking up with this girl, but the girl is like really weirdly obsessed with his gills.
Oh,
yeah, oh my god, when she
she
and it's like really painful.
She like shoves her hands in there.
Yeah, like they make you with him. I found it really interesting because like at first he's just a complete dickhead, and then they kind of just make you feel bad for him constantly because of all like the random shit that happened, like especially with sea life, like when he decides to rescue the dolphin.
Yeah, the dolphin and then the whale.
Yeah,
and then the whale in the season 2.
There's the scene where he rescues the dolphin and he's like in the truck driving it. And I can't remember, does he hit something? Or
he slams on his brakes because a truck comes in front of him, and then the whale the dolphin
flies through the window.
Yeah,
it's like just gore everywhere.
Yeah.
And then in season 2, and he's trying to stop the boys with a well, and they just drive right through it with the speedboat.
Right. Yeah, they just one thing here with the Deep in particular. There's a part when he's in the church, right, and he keeps seeing all the frescoes coming up. And you're like, what the fuck is with the frescoes, right? So one theory that's out there right now is that the frescoes are kind of like a play on the whole idea of don't drink the Kool-Aid.
Oh, yeah.
So that made a lot of sense to me when I heard that. Sorry, that was just a...
Yeah, that's great, yeah.
I really like the actor who played him, too.
Yeah.
I mean, I think just generally, I guess I can say about the entire cast, I think they did a really great job with casting.
Yeah.
Yes.
Some characters don't look the same. But I think they all did a really good job with the source material. So let's move on to the guy that started essentially the whole series, A-Train. A-Train, of course, the actor doesn't look like the comic books, but I think he does a pretty good job of being the kind of pompous douchebag that A-Train was.
Yeah.
A total dick. Just everything about him. He's just such an asshole.
Yeah.
All about himself. He's a total narcissist.
Yeah,
he's really. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Oh, okay. I was just gonna say the way he plays that character is almost feels watered down to me from how much of an asshole he is in the comics, because. And it's also a much less prevalent character in the TV show, which is crazy because he is a pretty much main character going on. But in the comics, he's very much more so, in my opinion.
Oh, yeah, I agree. I think they kind of cut his role down to make room for Homelander and the next character that we'll talk about, Maeve.
The Deep.
Yeah. Maeve. They definitely upped her character.
And I guess they added a lot to the Deep as well.
Yeah. But A-Train, I think, is very well represented in terms of the way his character would respond to things.
One thing I like that they did with him with it is it kind of helps show how fragile their position in the Seven is, because in season 2 he starts slowing down because he's been taking this drug that's been upping his power, and then it started kind of doing a reverse effect, and he's slowing down, and so they pretty quickly just replace him with another speedster that's now faster than him.
Yeah.
And like it doesn't really matter to them at all. It's just like instant.
So that's actually one of the things that's different from the comics to the TV show, because in the comics they discussed the compound V is what gives them their superpowers, and that the compound V that gives them the power is worth like, I can't remember that they give it a number. I think it's like $80 billion.
It was $19 billion for the one injection they gave Huey in the comics.
Yeah, $19 billion to create these superheroes. Jesus. And so they're actually a lot more hardcore on like,
that's just one injection.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's one injection. And so they basically want to keep them until they're dead, because we've invested a rather large amount of money into this person at that point.
Yeah, whereas like Homelander, for instance, he was getting these injections until his skin was basically diamond and he couldn't get a fucking needle to drive into his skin.
Mm-hmm.
And so you think about 19 billion and he grew up as a petri dish baby. Like how many injections went into that,
Right.
Yeah.
So going along with your point, like they're going to hold on tight to that.
Yeah. And well, that's one of the reasons he has maybe a little bit more Stockholm syndrome than everybody else does. Like he's really connected to Vought as a company because he doesn't know anything else, and they obviously are going to do everything they can to keep him under their control because he's such an expensive asset.
Yep.
So let's talk about Maeve for a minute.
Yep.
I really like, as a big Wonder Woman fan, I really like her representation in the TV show. But I do feel like that's maybe one of the bigger departures from the comics.
Okay.
Yeah, I would agree on that. They really don't touch on Maeve a whole lot in it. There's a handful of scenes maybe that could kind of tie into the comics, but that's about it. But one thing I can say is like post the in the comics is 9/11, but in the TV show it's the airplane scene.
Yeah.
That scene is
you can see that after that, every time you see her, she has a drink in her hand, which is very reminiscent of the comics.
Yeah, they definitely touch a lot on her alcoholism, and she's never particularly presented as terrible as everybody else.
Right.
It's more just that you kind of assume that she's suffered a lot of the similar traumas to what Starlight did.
Correct.
And it kind of, and a lot of her other personal issues, and it kind of just broke her. And so she's just kind of going through and doing whatever, is asked of her so that she can basically just be left alone.
Right.
Yeah. And that part kind of comes out a lot in the show when Starlight's dealing with the fact that she just got sexually assaulted and Maeve's basically like, you got to do what you got to do to be in the 7.
Yeah.
She's like, don't let them see you like this. You have to be strong kind of thing.
Yeah. Although she's a lot less sympathetic than that in the comic books.
Yeah.
In the comic books, she's just like, so what? Deal with it.
Well, what I love in the comic book too is
anyway.
She just looks so much more wrinkled and sunken in than she does in the TV show.
For sure.
So it kind of shows you the wear and tear of all of her habits.
That's Hollywooding it up a bit,
Right.
I think that's pretty much generally true of any comic book to film adaptation.
Yeah, I feel like since we're talking about Maeve, we should talk about the scene, the like airplane scene, because that was like a really kind of like holy shit moment that kind of like really showed you the character of Homelander.
So it's essentially in the cartoon TV show, it's Homelander and Maeve are going to save this plane that's basically going to crash, and they basically break in to save everybody, and then they realize that they can't save everybody. So a woman asks them just to save her child, and Maeve wants to do that, and Homelander says, "No, we can't leave anybody alive to tell the world basically that we screwed this up."
Yeah, we left everybody else here to die.
Right. So the Homelander essentially makes Maeve leave that one child that they could have saved.
Yeah.
Mhm.
They could have saved a lot of them,
Mhm.
but
But at least that one child.
Yeah, but
And so that definitely is in the TV show is a really good way to show the brutality of Homelander and gain a little bit more sympathy for Maeve.
Yep, and also show how important, like essentially how they look to everybody is. The fact that they have to be perfect 100% of the time, and can't have any flaw whatsoever. So it's better to let everybody die so they can't tell that story than to actually be a
Save
hero.
as many as they can.
Yeah.
In the comic book where they describe that sort of situation is these heroes become very rich and very famous, and so why would they want to actually start saving a ton of people to change the system that fundamentally benefits them so much?
Yep.
They would rather have the illusion of being a good guy.
Well, so the way I pictured it from the comics of it is, so they had the entire group go up there. For one, they went up there and none of them were trained to deal with a situation like that. So they came in there like, what the hell are we doing? And some of them actually bail and take off.
Yeah.
But it comes to a point where Homelander does destroy the control panel in the plane. And Maeve is talking to him about like, I thought you had a plan. No, I thought you had a plan. No, I thought you had. And then they end up making their way out to the door. And it was almost like Homelander had a realization that this could play beneficially to Vought, where this could be a whole PR fiasco in which they can blame everything on these soup terrorists, because in the TV show they're all about trying to get the
defense
superheroes in as a military presence.
That's definitely still prominent in the TV show as well, as them trying to basically get into doing, like weapons for the government.
And it actually plays in on that scene too when he comes back down and he's having the press conference.
The one, I think the one big difference between those two things in the comics versus TV show is that in the comic books it's actually about the terrorists doing 9/11.
And they were they stopping the planes?
Yeah,
right. Essentially, this was a hijacked plane from terrorists.
Two of them had been shot down already by the military, and there's a whole back scene going on where the president is like giving commands to shoot down the third one, and then the vice president, who is under Vought's control, tells everybody stop what you're doing. And well, actually, he knocks him out first and says, "I'm in control now. Stop what you're doing." And then the plane's back off, and then the Seven shows up, and then as they're flying away, Supersonic is on his back as they're going back away from it, like they bailed from the plane. And Supersonic is like, they're gonna die, and he drives through Homelander drives through the plane to be able to like redirect it away from the two towers or the twin towers. And so he basically kills Supersonic in the process, because the tearing through an airplane, for one, and for two, he does redirect it and actually hits the Brooklyn Bridge instead of the Twin Towers.
So they essentially, in this, alternate universe, technically avert 9/11.
Okay.
And that was obviously still a sort of hot subject at the time, because these comics started in 2006, and so 9/11 was still pretty fresh in American memory.
Yeah.
And it kind of fell into an homage, though, at the end of it. Like the very last page of that whole comic was the two towers still standing, or Twin Towers still standing, and it was the bridge burning below it.
Yeah. I think maybe that was even like a sort of Garthiness, like trying to get some catharsis from that moment, because of how 9/11 actually went down and stuff like that.
For sure.
We won't go too much into it, but the president and the vice president actually play a much more prominent role in the comics than they do in the TV series, at least so far.
Yeah.
And they're actually a really like direct analog to Bush and Cheney.
That makes sense.
Again, Garth Ennis is a very political person, and so there's
And
a
then-
lot of parallels.
But then it also in the TV show it plays into like Trump and his presidency as well.
Right. And they kind of just changed sort of the regimes they're vaguely representing there.
For sure.
That even it goes even so far as the vice president in the comic books even works for Halliburton.
Yep.
So we should continue on with the.
So talk more about the seven. So let's talk about Starlight next.
Okay.
So I really like the girl that they have play Starlight in the TV show. I think she's really good, and is really good at presenting that good religious girl who grew up thinking she was doing the right thing.
Is that kind of how she is in the comics too?
Yeah, for the most part.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think, she kind of. It takes her longer, I think, to lose her innocence in the show than it does in the comics, because in the comics, a lot more really stuff happens to her quicker.
Well, and there's a whole lot of backstory and other things going on that they're showing, so it could be similar, but yeah.
Like for one thing, so in the comic books in her hometown, she has a boyfriend.
Oh, okay.
And so she's trying to deal with having a relationship, but also all of the sexual assault that just happened to her, and how she would explain that to her boyfriend. And
Drummer boy,
with innocence and stuff like that.
Yeah. And does she still develop the relationship with
Huey
and join the boys?
It wasn't a relationship for a long time.
Yeah, it's much more slowly.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Obviously, it's accelerated for the show because where
relationships sell.
Yeah, relationships sell. You got to have at least one
and they also didn't know how long the show was going to run too.
Right. But I really liked Starlight. Her representation was very good, and mostly the same, I would say.
Mm-hmm.
And then so moving on to the next character. So it sounds like this one they replaced the character with translucence.
Yeah.
So if you guys want to talk on that, because I don't really know any of that. So
so translucent it doesn't exist in the comic books at all.
Okay.
Or if he does, he's a side character that I really don't remember.
No, I don't remember him ever coming up.
Yeah, I don't really remember him at all. But essentially, in the comic books, there's a Martian Manhunter replica.
Which has a really ridiculous name.
Jack from Jupiter.
Jack from Jupiter, yeah. Just Jack from Jupiter. It's essentially Martian Manhunter. Just a lot more of a coward.
Oh, okay.
In fact, when we were talking about that airplane scene and some of the heroes just bailing, he's the main character that just bails.
He's the first one. Like, I'm out.
So yeah, there's. I liked a couple episodes Translucent was in. I thought the guy was really good at being the sort of scummy representation that they wanted.
With that too is Jack from Jupiter, like the first one that the boys kind of collectively kill. Is that kind of how? No. So the first person that Huey ends up killing. What was
Bagpipe? It was his name.
No, Bagpipe was Huey's name when he was in Going with the G-Men.
Oh, you're right. It was the Legend's son.
Yeah, let me look it up real quick.
Fuck, what was his name?
So many crazy names in the show.
Yeah. Blarney Cock. Blarney Cock was his name.
Blarney Cock?
Yeah. So it's a character named Blarney Cock.
I just heard this earlier today. What was it?
Yeah. Of course, I wrote a whole bunch of notes for names, and I forgot them.
Fair.
So Blarney Cock is actually the character that Huey ends up killing, so that he kind of goes through his own emotional crisis kind of thing.
Okay.
they kind of pieced a bunch of other characters together to create Translucent.
Okay, that makes sense. And then, so one that I've been wanting to talk about, and I guess the last member of the 7, at least at the beginning of the show, Black Noir, the Batman character.
This is where my theories come from.
Yeah.
Yep. So this is a deep dive that I got into at one point when I was first watching The Boys, and I was like really getting into it. I started just looking stuff up about different characters because I didn't know where to find the comics and everything. And so this part, at least in the comics, it seems like they're changing it in the show. But in the comics, one thing I saw with him is that, so the big spoiler part, he is actually a clone of Homelander, and he ends up actually being the person that raped Butcher's wife as Homelander. And like from time to time, like he would pose as Homelander. And that's why he doesn't talk as Black Noir, because he sounds like Homelander, and he's actually the more brutal Homelander of the two.
There's one scene also in the comics that they don't, at least they haven't yet touched on. It could still go in that same direction in the TV show, but I don't think it will. But
because they showed him as they unmasked him, and he was like.
Yeah, there's one part though in the comics that is like they talk about how he was the one that actually raped Butcher's wife, and Noir was basically created to be able to destroy Homelander. But
again, trying to protect their asset.
Yeah,
they talk about there's a part where Homelander, there's pictures that Billy Butcher has of him biting into a baby's abdomen and ripping out its intestines.
Yeah.
And he's just straight up slaughtering hundreds of people. And that's the blackmail that he has over Homelander as to why Homelander shouldn't just kill Billy Butcher when he sees him. He's like, if you kill me, this is what's going to come out. And that was actually Black Noir that did that.
Yeah. So it's funny because in the TV show they definitely do portray him more in like this is Batman role. In the comics, there's actually a much more clear Batman representation.
Oh, is there?
Yeah, so he's like Batman / Iron Man.
Oh yeah.
His name is Tech Knight.
Oh
yeah, Tech Knight. I was just like, oh my god, are we really going there?
Yeah, so this is basically the best time we can talk about Tech Knight, just because he's the Batman allegory more so in the comics. So he's essentially the same sort of billionaire playboy that has a tech suit that he uses to fight crime or whatever. But, and this is one of the things that like I think they couldn't have really represented in the TV show because it would have just been too fucked up for mainstream audiences.
Yeah.
So Tech Knight has a kink of sorts, and his kink is that he has to have sex with any open hole he finds,
including an asteroid in the comics.
Yeah. So we'll get to that in just a second. So, okay. So this is actually the part where DC Comics, like in the middle of this series, actually shut down Wildstorm, the company that was at the time releasing The Boys.
Oh, okay.
So this was kind of the last straw for them. There's a part in the comic books where Tech Knight is flying with like his superhero team. He wasn't in the 7, but it's his own.
It's more like the Avengers team.
Yeah, it's a lot more like the Marvel version of the characters. But he's flying with them, and he has his own like version of Robin, essentially. What was his name?
It was a cyborg of some kind.
Yeah, I can't remember the Robin character's name. Ladio.
Ladio. Yep.
Ladio,
I was like
yeah.
something EO.
Ladio. So he watches Ladio flying, and he looks down and sees Ladio's his ass in the tights that he was in, and he ends up just having to go and
Yeah, he needs to fuck it basically.
yeah, he has to go, and he does so until he dies.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, he fucks him to death.
Yep.
And then he has to go to a therapist after he gets kicked out of the group.
Yep. And then oh, you guys are animal rights activists. You'll love this stuff. You love this.
Mm-hmm.
So he's in therapy, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the therapist has a cat.
Oh no.
And that therapist leaves the room.
No.
And then he fucks his butler's ear too.
Yeah. So he fucks the cat, right? So the cat, the therapist kicks him out after that, and then you see his home and like essentially the Alfred of this story, and he has sex with Alfred's ear.
And then after that, he's like, okay, I got your family's secret. Like, I'm going to keep your family's secret, but I need to get the fuck out of here because you're fucking weird in layman's terms. And then right after that, he starts going to all the different press to start like trying to sell his story.
Yeah. So essentially the Tech Knight gets ruined in this arc that he's in, publicly, because the butler who you hear raped essentially comes forward with his story.
Yep.
So that's actually one thing that I wanted to bring up. So all the superhero teams are very much represented. They're like versions essentially of known superheroes, like the DC ones and the Marvel ones. And I know like they're about to be bringing a lot of the more Marvel ones into the Boys TV show. I at least know that, is it Jason Eccles, whatever his name is?
Jason Eccles, yeah.
Jensen Ackles, yeah.
It's going to be like the Captain America kind of character.
Yes.
Who's apparently one of the most brutal characters. Or
One fact about that is Eric Kripke, who's doing the TV show right now. He was actually the story writer for Supernatural as well. But he had to keep it like PG for the WB.
Yeah. His skills improved.
Well, he wanted to do a lot more like what The Boys is, but the WB gave him so many limitations that Amazon is not giving him.
Right.
Yeah.
So his character's name is Soldier Boy. And so one of the things I actually really hope they do in the TV show is Soldier Boy has actually been sleeping with Homelander for years.
Okay.
Hoping that would get him into the set.
Oh.
Fun fact about that too is they have confirmed now that season 3 is going to include Herogasm.
Yeah. So let's talk kind of quickly about some of the other characters that you see and end up seeing in the TV show. As it relates to Tech Knight, there's also Popclaw. She's essentially a Catwoman allegory.
Okay.
Her and the Nightwing of this series. What was his name? See if I can find it.
Shadowwing?
No, Shadow. It was something Wing. Let's see if I can find it real quick.
Because he was the one that was supposed to be like the gay representative for.
Yeah.
I thought it was Shadowwing.
Might be. It's here somewhere.
Shadewing is what it was.
Shadewing.
Yeah. So he's essentially he's Dick Grayson. But he's presented as gay because Vought as a company, thought that was how they could sell him.
Okay.
But it's actually not at all. And then there's even this really awkward scene where Popclaw is having a threesome with those two characters, with both the Nightwing and
Yeah.
No.
and they have this really awkward moment where they like try not to look each other in the eye.
And she's like, what does he say? He's like, take that tech dick or something like that.
Yeah. So we'll finish up with the Tech Knight thing really quick. So he actually ends up getting killed.
Tech Knight does.
Tech Knight does. And so there's this part in the comics where it shows like there's an asteroid heading towards Earth, and Tech Knight flies up and has sex with the asteroid, destroying it and saving the world. And everybody's cheering him, yeah. And then you realize that he just had this dream while he was dying.
Oh.
The boys had put him into a coma, and that was his dream while he was in a coma.
But yeah, what do you guys think of the that they did that instead of just making entirely like new characters? What did you think of them kind of representing all of the characters?
Kind of like matching them together.
Swing Wing, that was his name.
Swing Wing?
Swing Wing.
Not Shade Wing, Swing
I
Wing.
knew it was like something that rhymed.
Right.
Anyway, so I think they had to consolidate characters.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, as we just discussed, I mean, of all the things we've talked about so far, that little bit about Tech Knight was one of the more explicit parts.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Very much so.
And I also think because that was the thing that like DC said, we're done with this. They probably had to cut that out because, to a degree, DC still owns the rights to those early comics.
I can say, like with the Tech Knight thing, the first episode of season 3 is going to be called Payback, which is the group that Tech Knight is from.
Right.
So it could still come into play. It's just they had to show like this is what we can do.
Yeah.
So give us free reign, kind of thing, you know.
Right. Yeah. So Tech Knight, I think, is going to be a really sensitive subject if or when they do approach it in the show.
Yeah.
Because, like I said, that was DC's like, we're done with this. You know.
Mm-hmm.
They have confirmed that Tech Knight will come back at some point.
Mm-hmm.
How big of a role that is, I'm not sure.
So in regards to Black Noir, I think the character was well done for the TV show, and sort of combining the little, I think, bits of Tech Knight that are going to come in. So mild spoiler alert for potential for what could happen in the TV show. In the comic books, people who are injected with V can sometimes come back to life.
Okay.
They're not quite themselves anymore. They're more of a zombie version of themselves.
It's kind of like a Lazarus Pit effect kind of thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they come back as more of an undead zombie version of themselves. But I think that's what's going to happen going forward in the TV show for Black Noir.
Okay. Yeah.
Because the female in the show has killed him, essentially.
Oh yeah. And then since we're getting to the end of the 7, what did you guys think of Stormfront?
Just a couple seconds.
Yeah.
So Stormfront is actually a male in the comic books.
Yeah, I did see that, and it was kind of like the predecessor to Homelander.
So what I really like too about Stormfront in the comic books as well as the TV show is they still kind of brought it back to the same way that Stormfront actually died in both of them.
Mm-hmm.
With they did it in the comic books with the boys kicking the shit out of Stormfront, whereas in the TV show they did it with the whole Girls Get It Done squad.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Like I didn't know really how to put that.
No, that's an I think most people understand what you mean when you say that.
Yeah,
That reminded me of that scene by you saying that.
yeah, the Girls Get It Done squad. They're kicking the shit out of her, and like, what I really like how Eric Kripke really did with that is most of the time you see females fighting in superhero movies or TV shows and those sorts of things, and they're still very regal and like flowing with the way they do it.
Mm-hmm.
Where in this, they're like, I don't exactly remember the exact wording of it, and she's like, "Eat my shit, bitch," or something like that.
Yeah,
Like that was very much. It was a homage to the base material, but then it also brought in the whole message they were bringing in on that season.
it was a lot more raw and real than we typically see from female superheroes, and just the kind of sheer brutality.
Right.
I mean, the girl who played Stormfront in the TV show was definitely you definitely wanted you definitely wanted her to die. Like,
Yeah, I thought she did a really good job because when she first came in, she was very good at playing up that like fakeness about like how good of a person she kind of was, and then the subtle racism started coming in, and then you saw that like how terrible she was, and that she was like a Nazi, and
and she was all about swinging social media to her direction too.
Yeah, the social media.
Yeah, so that was definitely not a theme that was. I mean, it existed, but it definitely was not as prevalent when she was in the comic or when he was in the comic books. Because I believe their arc was probably maybe 2008, 2009. Maybe even still 2007, actually. So, social media was not as big back then.
Yeah.
Right.
So that was kind of a bit of a modern spin on the character that I liked.
Yeah, and it was interesting that they were showing her as like a young superhero, and she was actually older than the rest of them, which was kind of interesting. And it was really interesting to find a character that you hated more than Homelander.
I especially like towards the end of season 2 that she's in. Even Homelander, for some of the racist rhetoric that she would say, even he was kind of like, "Whoa, chill it out."
It almost, in a way, redeemed some of the things that he did.
Yeah.
Especially when she was with his kid. Like you could really see his like fatherly instinct come out when she would try to throw those, like when she says they're trying to eradicate us because of our race, and you could see the look in his face, like, "Are you fucking serious right now?"
Yeah. And the actor did a really good job of having those like subtle facial cues.
Yeah, absolutely.
It was definitely very satisfying to see her get hers at the end of season 2.
Yeah.
So finishing up with the kind of superhero part of this. So what are your favorite like powers from like all the teams or anything like both in comics or shows?
Okay.
I can tell you right now, my favorite superpower that's represented in that entire show is the elongated dick.
I knew you were going to say that.
I was literally
the best one
that I had. That was one of them.
It's essentially there's a character.
Love sausage.
Yeah, in one of the prison scenes. That is.
Is that what his name is?
Yeah.
Love sausage.
Yeah. Yes. He's essentially can control his penis, and it's very, very long. And essentially, he has Mr. Fantastic powers, but exclusively for his junk.
Yep.
I love
that was one of mine too.
Yeah, I love the scene of the show where he's like, I think it was Lamplighter was like hiding behind a door trying to escape all these villains with superpowers. And there's a window, and the window breaks, and then the dick wraps around his neck, starts choking.
Oh, no, that was Mother's Milk.
Oh, that's what it was. Yeah.
Lamplighter was kind of an interesting character too.
Yeah, Lamplighter's in there a little bit. What was your favorite power?
My favorite power, well, one of them was the same exact guy, Love Sausage, the Russian badass.
Yeah.
And the other one was one that came from Super Duper.
I
think it was Super Duper. It might have been one of the other groups that's in this universe, but there's a female in the group that she gets superpower strength and she turns into this monster, much like the Hulk.
Mm-hmm.
But the only time it happens is when she's on her menstrual cycle. And like,
I can tell you right
beautiful. It was like, oh my God, yes. And like you said, you can relate. And I brought it up to my fiance, and I was like, I think you can too. And
oh no, that's on the couch territory, bro. That's
okay.
that's definitely like it. I can guarantee we will not see her in the TV show.
Yeah, that's fair.
Yeah, I don't think that would play very well. I don't think that would play very well.
I mean, we might see it. Like, that show doesn't pull too many punches.
And
they pull
the further they're going, the fact that they've confirmed Herogasm says a lot about what they're getting allowed to be able to show.
Mm-hmm. I think maybe we'll get to see like maybe a passing reference to her, like we'll see her in the background or something like that.
Right.
So there's like that little bit of those who've read the comic book sort of fan service.
Yeah, it'll probably be another like movie thing or something.
Yeah. There'll be like references to it, but it won't be like direct.
Do you know what I could see them doing with that? Having like a Lifetime show on in the background.
Oh,
it's
yeah.
all about her.
Yeah, it could be. Yeah. What is your favorite superpower on the show?
It's hard for me to say because like I don't know a lot of
The side characters.
As much. I kind of like that it just kind of represents the different super like heroes and stuff from the comics and that kind of stuff. I don't really have a good answer for this one.
I mean, I think the right answer is actually super speed. I mean, I think Adrian does it to a degree, but I mean, especially like if you're thinking about the Flash and all those, super speed is just the power to have.
Yeah,
just is.
If you're talking like powers in general, yeah, super speed. Like if I was going to have a power, actually, I like teleportation. I think that's a really cool power, and I think you could do a lot with that as well.
Mm-hmm. But speed's kind of the closest to it in this show. Teleportation, anyway,
for sure.
So let's talk a little bit about some of the early story arcs of the comic book series that aren't in the TV show. One of the ones that I really like that I would recommend to people to check out is a series where they're sort of investigating one of the super teams called the G-Men. And he actually goes undercover inside of like one of their like junior divisions. And basically National Lampoon's Animal House. Like it's just a bunch of partying frat boys that happen to have superpowers. And some of it's so funny.
Yeah, that whole fucking series was pretty great.
Yeah, especially like that sort of like teen party genre. That's like the part of the series for you.
Yeah. They actually even started off with the toga party from Animal House too.
Yeah, it's literally an Animal House reference.
The G-Men was a beautiful tie-in. Well, I wouldn't say beautiful, but it was a very good tie-in to the X-Men.
Yeah.
Because
I guess that makes sense. The G-Man.
Godolkin, I think is what his name was.
Yeah.
I really like how they started it off with Silver Kincaid. And how she had walked out into a public square and the last thing she said was, "Where is Uncle Paul?" And then she basically collapsed her own skull in, which I feel like Cindy is a good tie-in to that from the TV show. Yeah. And there's no confirming that she actually collapsed it in, but then Mother's Milk goes to research a little bit further and actually finds out that Uncle Paul was the last person to see her before being picked up or abducted by Godolkin.
So Godolkin is essentially the Professor X of the G-Men.
Okay.
And he molests all of the children that he picks up to take to his school.
Yeah. He actually abducts and then molests.
Yeah.
and Vought took them in because they saw the money value into it. And Uncle Paul actually ends up killing himself because he had no idea what had happened to Silver Kincaid.
So who's the Uncle Paul character?
It's just so Silver Kincaid is basically the first interaction we get to the G-Man, and she's essentially just a little girl who was kidnapped by Kincaid to basically assault and then turn into a superhero. And Uncle Paul is just her guardian who lost her.
Oh, okay.
He essentially commits suicide, which causes her to just bite the big one, I guess, and just give up on life, on top of all the other trauma that obviously she suffered.
I don't think that she actually knew that, or that he had killed himself. I don't think, at least.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember that part.
Yeah.
Anyway, that's the relationship between those characters.
Okay.
They're actually planning on doing a spinoff on the G-Men as well. To do a TV show based off of it.
Yeah, some of the art for that series, for that little arc, is really fun because there's a lot of party scenes. So there's a lot of really fun stuff going on in the background, like people puking in fish tanks. So all sorts of fun little stuff in there.
Very much a play on a frat house.
So you were talking about Herogasm as being something that's coming into the TV show. Tell us just a little bit about that story arc.
Okay, so basically, superheroes tell the world that there is an alien force coming to cause the world harm, and they need to go out and defeat it. But in all reality, they're going to Costa Rica to have a giant hero orgasm. Orgy, excuse me.
Yeah.
Whatever.
One thing leads to the other.
Whatever.
Hopefully, yeah.
Orgasms.
Yeah,
They go to have a giant hero orgy, and while they're there, Starlight actually comes to it and realizes exactly what's going on as she walks out to the pool area where everyone is just doing their thing, and at that point is kind of put off by it, but along the way, Homelander ends up flying up into the air completely butt-ass naked, and he ends up blowing up the plane. There is intercourse happening between Homelander and Soldier Boy at that point.
Yep. That's where I imagine Jensen Ackles will come in.
Yeah,
maybe
they have confirmed that there will not be a sex scene between Homelander and Soldier Boy, though. That was one of the things that they've confirmed when they told
there won't be
that Soldier Boy was coming.
There won't be.
There will not be. Yeah.
Oh.
Yep. But they did say that Herogasm is coming into play into this season here. And basically, there's a character that is the equivalent of the Thing from the Fantastic Four that ends up falling off of the roof and killing himself.
I remember that.
And Homelander is like, well, there's always at least one hero death when we have this, so it's no big deal.
Yeah, that's cool. That happens.
Yeah.
So we're already getting a little bit long on time here, but
yeah,
if you were to recommend The Boys to somebody, what would you say that you loved about it that really made you want to talk about it and be really interested in the series?
The depth of it. I would recommend somebody to watch the show, and if they like the show, really dive deep into the comics, because that would be what I would recommend. Yeah,
I would actually agree with you, because I think they did take the source material of the comics and then put it into a more palatable package for the TV show. And then if you can withstand the craziness that happens there, then you can understand who Tech Knight is.
Right. Yeah. I think that's probably one of the most fucked up arcs of that.
No, it really is. That's why it sticks out. I've been talking about it so much because it just sticks out of my brain so much.
Yeah.
Oh, one thing we forgot to mention about him is they actually find out the reason he has all of these perversions is because he has a brain tumor.
Yeah,
and it's pushing on the part of his brain that controls, your ability to resist sexual temptation. So that's pretty interesting.
Yeah.
And it takes this character that otherwise is just really irredeemable for not being able to like resist himself, and puts it into a context that's like, okay, well, it's not entirely his fault.
Yeah.
Right.
One thing that's really interesting with The Boys, and actually, like at this point, we can kind of start talking about the things that we like about The Boys, like is the fact that even though it's so like gory and brutal and like sexually fucked up and everything, it's also incredibly intelligent and really telling, showing like how fucked up a world could be with superheroes, with just how people are already. And then if you add powers into it, how much more fucked up it can be, and kind of showing how like people get more fucked up when they have superpowers because they're kind of losing their humanity. So they just kind of have to go so extreme. Like it's like a really extreme, like pop star kind of thing.
When you become a god, how much longer can you sympathize with someone who isn't?
Yeah.
And actually, that's also a representation of just wealth in our world. And how much just being wealthy kind of takes away from your humanity.
Yeah.
Because a lot of these people, they start doing, their main motive to start doing kind of a lot of the things that they do, like just letting people die when it doesn't benefit them, is money.
Yeah, it's true.
Money, even when you have all sorts of superpowers, is still a main driving force.
Yeah, definitely. So what's kind of the thing about Boys that you really like, Jeremy?
So I really, as a big superhero fan, I've always kind of thought it was a little odd that people would just choose to do good things if they had superpowers. Because I think most people that I know, well, I think we generally try to do good. We'd probably do a lot of messed up things too, especially at first.
Oh yeah.
I mean, any sort of superpower, I would immediately figure out, again, talking about money, how to cash in and get rich off of it. Not just for my benefit, but for the benefit of those around me as well.
Yeah.
But my first instinct wouldn't be, oh, I'm going to go try to save the world. It would be, how can I use this to rob a bank? Or
yeah. Agreed.
Or make our podcast popular.
Yeah, make your podcast popular. Yeah. I think that's real. I also just, I'm always intrigued by really dark shit.
Yeah, me too.
It feels more real when it's dark, which is sad.
Yeah, because
kind of
like with DC and Marvel, it feels very cookie cutter. Like it's, you just plug in the powers that this person has, and it's pretty much the same thing, Whereas in this world, they are actually using it for their own, nefarious or personal reasons,
Yeah, and I think it does a good job of showing that nobody is a good, nobody's a good or white side. Like if you're black and white, nobody's a white person.
Right.
Nobody's a completely good person. Everyone is a shade of gray.
Yeah, no one's a white.
Everyone has their own.
Yeah.
How in depth it is, or how dark.
And also, everybody has their own traumas, which create them as what you perceive to be an evil person as well. You even take someone like Homelander, who in TV shows represented as so immoral and so terrible, and then you put that in the context of being a child who never received love. It creates a really good gray characters, and no one is completely absolved of that. I think that's what I really like about it.
Yeah.
Even Starlight, a lot of the things that she does, a lot of choices she makes, she's just starting to make them now in the TV show, but in the comics, she makes a lot of decisions that you're like, I don't know if that was a good idea.
Right.
So, any more thoughts? Anything else you want to say about The Boys?
Fucking love it. Recommend people to watch it if they haven't. and then look into the comics if you can.
Yeah, and they're very well drawn too.
Yeah.
Boy, I
There's
wish I
like
could remember the name
artists.
of the artist on it. I look it up because I want to give him a shout out too, because we talked about Garth Ennis. He's the writer of the comics. Does a fantastic job. They have the same artists pretty much consistently throughout.
Yeah, I think they had like two or three of the editions that they had somebody else.
Yeah. One thing I want to bring up that I realized we really didn't talk about, which is kind of funny. We mainly talked about the villains of the show. We barely touched on like the boys themselves, and just kind of, it's really interesting to see these people that are like having to do such terrible things to be able to deal with these heroes, and bring them down and try to like show the world what these people really are. And it's kind of interesting to follow this, especially Huey, as he's kind of just evolving down this road with Butcher, who's so brutal and so like unforgiving with everybody.
It's a bit of a revenge fantasy that I think we can all relate to in a way, because essentially superheroes, as I was talking about, Garth Ennis does a lot of like sort of anti-capitalist stuff, and the whole thing is kind of an allegory for how powerless a regular person feels in relation to the wealthy and in relation to government. And so it's kind of one of those things where you get to live through them being able to get a measure of revenge on the powerful. And that's sort of where they come in. Is a regular person's power fantasy, being able to stand up to those that are powerful.
Yeah.
And all the characters are very well played in the show and are represented. Like I said, I think Mother's Milk is probably the most like pure heart character, maybe in the entire series, actually.
Yeah, I would say that. And even in the comics, it's the same way too.
Yeah. Very little question that he's fundamentally a good person.
The backstories of all of them, though, that come up in the comics are pretty much gold.
Oh yeah. Yeah, hopefully a lot more of that looks like it's going to start coming out, especially for Frenchie. They've already explored a lot for Butcher, but I think Frenchie's is kind of starting to come to the front.
Because I would love to watch Frenchie's dad go into a baguette joust on a bicycle and then die at the end of it.
What?
Yeah, that's the thing. Of course, through all the brutality of the show and all the dark spots, there actually is a lot of comedy to be had as well.
Definitely.
A lot of good laughs in the TV show and in the comics. And Derek Robertson is the name of the artist, and he does a really good job. A lot of it's very dark in terms of the color palette that he uses, and it looks really cool. I would say it's something sort of akin to what Hellboy comics look like.
Okay.
Just being kind of darkly lit most of the time. But he does a great job. And
Kind of really sets the ambiance of the whole storyline.
And one thing that's kind of cool is I really think that through the 6 years that this series was running, very little time was not the same two people doing it.
No, that's great.
It was always the same writer and the same artist almost the entire time. And
Yeah,
so
I
really
think there was
there.
2 series with a different artist.
Yeah.
And then the rest of it, yep.
Yeah, I'd love to see what Garth Ennis feels about the TV show versus the comics, because I know there's a lot of comic book writers, famously the guy who wrote Watchmen or V for Vendetta.
Watchmen is beautiful.
He hates all of the representations of his comic books in other media. In fact, he practices witchcraft, and he put a curse on the Watchmen movie. That
It does explain my shit luck because I love that movie.
Oh, I love that movie too.
I love the movie. I think actually, we talked about
Yeah.
Watchmen at one point on this show.
Yeah.
And
Okay.
it followed it almost perfectly except for the end.
Yeah. But it was not a huge commercial success. It really wasn't.
It wasn't.
And
Because everybody focused on the
yeah, and it's because Alan Moore put a curse on it. Yeah.
There's that blue penis.
It worked. So I would love to see what Garth Ennis has to say about The Boys.
Mm.
His other series, Preacher, is also a TV series. So
Yeah.
All right. Well, I think that just about wraps it up. Unless you guys have anything else you want to say. All right. Well, so we just barely touched on the surface about a lot of things. We don't have enough time to go into a lot of detail, but is a franchise that I really like, and I think a lot of people enjoy it. So if you don't mind a little bit of, perversion and brutality, and you want some really good character development, definitely check out the show on
Amazon Prime.
Amazon Prime. Yes. So check out the show on Amazon Prime, and then get into some of those comic books if you can. They have them all in trade paperbacks now. I'm not sure exactly how many volumes there are. I know there's 72 issues.
They broke it down into 6 volumes plus the Herogasm, the Butcher, something in Candlestick, and then Dear Becky.
Yeah. So 6 compilations and 3 side series. I know I'm going to go back and actually try to get some of those again and read some of them.
Honestly, after this conversation, I would like to read all of them as well.
Yeah, you're definitely not getting. You can get the feeling of the comics in the show, but you're definitely not repeating stories too often. Which I kind of like about it. The spirit carries over, but you can definitely have 2 different experiences, so you can enjoy both.
That's kind of nice.
It's not a side by side remake to where once you've seen the show, you have no need for the comic books.
Yep.
Right. Yeah, definitely.
So anyway, please check it out. It's really great stuff. Adam, thanks for coming on.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, really, really good talk, really good conversation. We'll have to have you on again soon.
Yep.
Other than just Into the Elements as your wonderful character, Edinburgh.
Yeah. You definitely would know Adam's voice from Into the Elements. He plays Edinburgh on that show. You guys can catch our next episode of that next week. And until then, you guys keep it nerdy out there.